Hello, NaNoWriMo. Did you see that too, Josie? Yeah.
No.
I don't know how people know how we get on, but we get a message from Catherine that just is live exclamation mark. And I don't think I saw it for like 3 seconds or so. So Josie and I both jumped. But here we are, we're live.
Hi,
Here we are.
everybody.
And we have a special NaNoWriMo webcast. We're just past the midway point of NaNoWriMo. It's November 18th. I'm always like, at this point, I'm like, how is it November 18th? Like, I think it's more like, in my mind, like November 8th, November 4th, but we're past the halfway mark, which means we're in this terrain that many people call the muddy middle. And it's a dangerous, dangerous terrain of NaNoWriMo. A lot of people, they step into the muddy middle and they actually get stuck, or they turn around, and we don't want you to keep turn around or be stuck. We want you to keep getting through it, and you'll find dry land soon, I promise. You might even find great currents of water that will just carry you through, waves that will carry you through to the end. And so Marissa, who is a seasoned NaNoWriMo veteran, is going to provide a lot of great advice. And I just want to say, so I'm now at 17,286 words for the month. And for those of you who have sophisticated math skills, you'll know that that is not where I should be. I don't know where I should be actually, but probably around 28-ish thousand, maybe 30,000. I didn't check, but I'm behind. But here's the thing. And if you're like me and you're thinking like, oh, I'm behind and I'm not going to catch up, the thing I'm really focused on is my streak. And so I have an 18-day streak, and I'm really focused on getting all of the badges. We have streak badges. So I want to get a streak badge for 30 days of writing, with the premise that if I write for 30 days, I will regain momentum and perhaps make it to 50,000. And if I don't make it to 50,000, I'm going to say it's my own win, because it's been a tough month for me. So just to write every day is important. So we are here with Josie Japule, who is our NaNoWriMo editorial intern. And I want to give Josie the opportunity to introduce herself, but I want to hear where you are in your NaNoWriMo writing, Josie.
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm Josie. Yeah, I'm the editorial programs intern. And for my Nano project, I just reached 25K like yesterday. And I know that's technically still behind, but that's like the most I've ever written for Nano. So I'm like really confident that I'll probably win this year, hopefully. I don't want to like jinx it, but I really want to win this year. And
I don't think that's jinxing it. I think by saying it, you're going to be all the more accountable right now. You're going to have all the hundreds or thousands of people watching the webcast right now be watching your word count. Sorry, I don't put too much pressure on you.
There are studies that show the more people you tell a goal to, the more likely you are to achieve it. So I think you just locked it in.
Exactly.
Thanks to everyone YouTube guys. But yeah, that's how I'm doing on Nano. And if you don't know anything about me, as an intern, I'm involved myself in several of Nano's online events. So you've probably seen me around in the virtual write-ins. And I also help run the Nano blog in a program we call 30 Covers 30 Days. And you should go check it out right now, because I am proud of a lot of the work that goes on there.
Cool. Thank you, Josie. And I just realized I printed out this bio for Marissa, and it's not in my papers here. I'm missing the Marissa bio. And I was going to say, we were going to.
Well, you really know me, Grant.
I know. I'm on the spot here. Are we live? Yeah, we're live. Yeah, well, I was going to say we're going to introduce you in a different way, Marissa, because I didn't want to read your bio, because I think people can Google it, and you're the #1 best-selling author of, like, CINDER here, which was, I think, your first NaNoWriMo novel. And you've just written Curse, which has this really amazing cover. I want Marissa's covers to someday be all lined up,
right?
Or something.
They're gorgeous.
They're just such works of art. Like, if you really study it, it's really interesting, because initially, sorry, I'm getting off topic, but I just thought this was like a river of blood flowing from the castle. But then I noticed there's a figure here. So anyway, many great books that she's written. But Josie and I thought, maybe instead of reading the bio, we would just say some interesting facts about you that we've encountered online or in interactions with you. So Josie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So
I feel like I'm gonna be fact checking now. I'll let you know how accurate
they are. These are questionable facts.
Okay, so it's a questionable fact. We're not sure if I did read Cinder in high school, but we're pretty sure we did because I talked about it in one of my college interviews where they asked me what my favorite book, and I said Cinder.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
And also, I did go to one of your talks and during the Texas Teen Book Festival one year. Don't ask me the year. I really don't remember that part. And I think that was when you released Renegades. So it's really exciting to see you back here with another book.
I love it. So we've kind of met before.
That's so cool, Josie. Well, I want to mention that Marissa is a member of the NaNoWriMo Writers Board, which is fantastic. And she's also been a more than generous supporter with her time on webcasts like this, with writing pep talks, and as a special donor. We sometimes say she's NaNoWriMo's patron saint. I don't want to put you on the spot here, Marissa, but yeah, so you make a lot of the writing that's happening right now happen. So we just have to thank you for that. And let me think. The fact I'm going to mention that I'm always so impressed and intrigued by, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this during the interview, but that you signed up for NaNoWriMo for the first time, and I forget the year too, but I know it was a while back. But the way that I remember the story is that you set out to write what would later become CINDER and the Lunar Chronicles, but you wrote way beyond 50,000 words. You wrote 150,000 words that first NaNoWriMo, which is amazing to me.
So that was actually my third time doing Nano.
Okay.
The first time I ever did it was with a fanfic. I used to write Sailor Moon fan fiction. And then the second time I did it was with a YA, like a contemporary suspense. It was about a girl who was secretly an assassin character. But I never finished that novel. And then the third time I did Nano was when I had the idea for the Lunar Chronicles.
Okay.
And that was 2008. And I did draft Cinder, Scarlet, and Cress during that November. And it came in just over 150,000 words.
That's amazing. So there it is, inspiration for anyone who's behind on your word count, like me.
Is it inspirational, or do people hear that and just well, I give up?
Yeah. You've got it in you, people. Trust me.
You can do it. If
Trust
I can
me.
do it, you can do it.
Trust me. Well, Marissa, I'm very curious because I know you read a lot of fanfic. So there's a lot of writing, pre-NaNoWriMo writing in your past. And I read in your bio that one of your first spoken words was actually story, and your favorite toy as an infant was a soft, squishable book. And I have moments like that in my past too, to the point that I think I'm somehow genetically disposed to be a writer. And I'm wondering, have you always felt destined to be a writer?
I pretty much have. Yeah. I mean, there were points in childhood when I had other dreams. I had a brief period where I thought I wanted to be a Broadway star. I can't sing, so that's ironic. And there was a time when I really wanted to be a fashion designer, which is also weird because I don't really like clothes all that much. But they just seemed like really cool jobs. But I always came back to writing. I loved books and I loved stories, and I had a really active imagination, and I was making up stories from the time that I could talk. So it was I would always circle back to wanting to be a writer.
Cool.
Okay, so back to fan fiction. I always think it's great when we see authors who were big nerds and continue to be big nerds because you were introduced to anime and fan fiction as a teen, and then you completed over 40 Sailor Moon fanfics under pen name Alicia Blade. So what did you learn by writing fan fiction?
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, so there's the craft stuff, I learned how to tell a story. I learned how to write beginning, middle, and end, how to work through the murky middle, how to write good character interactions and dialogue and action scenes. I mean, just the craft, the only way you get better at it is doing it and practicing it and trying out different techniques and seeing what you like and what doesn't work. I wrote hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words while I was writing Sailor Moon fan fiction. And I really credit that even more than I have a bachelor's in creative writing, but I really feel like it was writing fan fiction that taught me how to be a writer. And then there's also so many beneficial career stuff that came with writing fan fiction. Learning how to finish something. You know, if I would start a story and post the first chapter on the internet and then readers start reading it, I made a promise to myself and to the readers that I would finish that. I would never just leave a story unfinished, which for people who are in fandoms know, like, that's a big problem in the fan fiction world. So I was like, never, I will finish everything that I start. And that is really difficult when you get halfway through and now it's like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever and it's not going as well as I thought. And there's this new shiny idea over here that you want to work on instead. So it really taught me to take it seriously and stay focused and kind of start treating it like a career.
Can we still find your fanfic out there in the world?
Yes, you sure can. It is all still posted on fanfiction.net under Alicia Blade.
Okay, and a follow-up to this, one of the advice I've gotten this Nano is to like write fan fiction about your own characters to feel motivated again. I guess that's basically just writing short stories, but I like the idea of saying write fan fiction for yourself.
I love that.
So is there like a story of yours that you would like to revisit using the format of fan fiction?
That is so funny. Because when I wrote, so I've got the Lunar Chronicles, but then as a part of that series, I did a book of short stories, which is called Stars Above. And then I also did 2 graphic novels, which are spin-offs of the Lunar Chronicles. And the reason that writing those 2 things, especially the graphic novels, it was just like pure joy because it did feel like writing fan fiction for my own series. And I was like, I just really want to hang out in this world some more. And here's an idea and I'll follow this character now. And so it was, I don't know, something about it felt like it really took a lot of the pressure off for some reason. And it was so much fun writing those. For future things, I don't know. I have lots of ideas for other books and other projects, including potentially revisiting some of the worlds that I've been in. But if I were to like write a fanfic, it would probably be something like a prequel How They Met story for Captain Chromium and the Dread Warden from the Renegades Trilogy.
That would be good.
That would be my fanfic.
So, okay, I think that's pretty great. I just love hearing so much about fanfic, and like fan fiction is just like a great community, I feel.
It really is.
So, how did you let's go on to like Nano questions. So how did you first come across Nano, and what was like your early Nano experience like?
Yeah, so I distinctly remember the first time, so let me count it. So in 2006, so the first time I ever heard about Nano was in December of 2005, and it had just ended.
I love this.
And someone in the fan fiction world mentioned it to me and was like, you know, have you heard about this thing? All these people were writing novels last month. And I was like, how did nobody tell me? That is like exactly the sort of challenge that I live for. So I put it on my calendar for the following year and waited in just like anticipation. And so then by the time Nano of 2006 rolled around, I had an idea, and it was a fanfic, and it was this really fun contemporary story. So I wrote for Sailor Moon, and it was like the 5 main characters, alternate reality, were like all did a dating auction, and they all got hooked up with like different guys. And so then I had like multiple subplots of them all on their different romances, but like one of the guys turned out to be a stalker, and like not all of them ended super romantic, but it was really, really fun.
That's so great. And I want to remind viewers to put your questions in the chat, and that Catherine's going to send them to us so that we can ask Marissa, because we want to answer as many questions as you have. And I love this fanfic conversation, and I love the idea that fan fiction was your, I don't know, your training ground, your MFA program. It was like more, you know, that I'm always so impressed by that, and what you can learn from that. And I guess like and also you mentioned that there was the pressure or the incentive or the desire to finish, that you had to finish, that you made, that was something you learned. And so since we're here in the muddy middle, And I know you started writing fanfic when you're pretty young, like 14 or so. So there's this question of always like, are you a planner, a pantser, a plancer? And I'm just curious, like how that has perhaps evolved in your life, how the degree of planning or pantsing, and how you were that young fanfic writer to the writer you are now, how you approach novel writing.
Yeah, I mean, when in my early days, when I was doing just strictly short stories, I think it was mostly pantsing. I would get an idea and I would sit down and I would write it, and they'd be, gosh, maybe only 15 or 20 pages early on. And so my brain could hold enough information to like get me through that complete story. But as soon as my stories got longer to the point where now we're writing chapters, I became an outline writer really, really early on, and would always have a plan. I don't do super detailed outlines, maybe just a sentence or two per chapter or per scene, just enough that I have an idea of where the story is heading. And it always changes. You have that initial outline, you have that initial plan, and then you start writing and you uncover something and you're like, wait, it'd be better if we did this instead. Or, oh, I can combine these two elements together into one scene. Or maybe, no, I actually need multiple chapters to explore this further. So I give myself a lot of leeway to, I don't have to stick to the outline. But I find so much comfort in knowing that there's a plan, so that it kind of keeps me from feeling that anxiety of like, but what if the story just doesn't work? What if I get halfway through and then I'm just stuck and I have no idea where I'm going to go from there? So I really like knowing that there's some plan guiding me along. Yeah.
That's cool. I like how the plan, sometimes I think the problem with plans is that people can think they're too rigid, that they're done and they have to follow the plan. So I like how the plan is constantly morphing and you're kind of finding the story in the plan.
Yeah.
And I just
redo my outlines constantly. Like I'll write a few chapters and then go tweak the outline. And then I write a little bit more and then I tweak the outline. So it's very fluid.
Yeah. And that's a good way to get through this muddy middle too, I think, is to keep asking yourself, well, what if my characters do this? What if we go beyond the plan? Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so more on the muddy middle. I know you did write a nano pep talk in the past, and you said these are the times when you must proceed on willpower and caffeine and the unstoppable confidence that each word you write is one word closer to a fictional novel, which is a great quote. I love that quote.
I stand by it.
So I was wondering if you could tell us more about how you show up to like write even when you're not feeling inspired.
Yeah. The middles are hard because we all experience it. And I don't know if a lot of aspiring writers realize that this is such a common problem. It really is universal. We all go through it. And I think some people, when it starts to get hard, they start to doubt themselves. We all doubt ourselves. I still doubt myself and I still doubt the book. But I've been through it enough times now to know this is just a part of the process. And there's going to be, 30 to 40,000 words right there in the middle of the novel that are really hard. And every chapter is going to be a struggle. And I'm going to be, just constantly feeling like, this book is so boring. And, why would anybody read this? And, just on and on and on. But I've done it enough times now that I know if I do keep pushing forward, eventually we're going to get to the other side. And like you were talking about, Grant, you do get this surge of new energy as you get toward the end of the book. And suddenly things start clicking into place and characters are revealing really cool secrets. And now you're building up to the climax and like all the cool things are happening that you've been setting up for this entire time. And then it gets to be really fun again. So I just remind myself that if I just keep plowing forward one step at a time, one sentence at a time, eventually we will get to the other side and it will be fun again. And I will remember why I love this book and this story. But if I give up, then I'll never get there. So that's kind of, I repeat that in my head a lot. Like, you're going to get through it. this part is terrible, but it won't last forever. Eventually it'll be fun again.
That's such great advice. And I really appreciate how you revealed your own self-doubt, that you have those moments where you still have a muddy middle or muddy middles.
We all do.
I know, we all do. But I think sometimes, like, if you're beginning writers might look up to you and think, oh, you just coast along, you know how to do it, you've mastered writing. And I think, no, you don't ever really master, like, every novel's new, right? Like, so there's going to be muddy middles. I always say it's plural, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious because I often say I don't believe in writer's block, but I think it's an interesting question. I think we assign ourselves writer's block sometimes. So I'm curious, do you experience writer's block, or do you believe in it, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I also think that it's pretty much a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
I should say, I think that there's two different kinds of writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to distinguish between the two. There are times in our lives when writing isn't a priority and shouldn't be a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're going through a period of grief or a huge life change, or I don't know, you have a sick kid at home, or like there are going to be times when there are other things in life that are taking your energy and your creativity, and you need to focus on those things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in one of those stages, give yourself a break. Like you
Yeah.
don't need to add writing and that pressure and then the guilt of not writing on top of that. Like, so if that's where your writer's block is coming from, I'm all for taking the time you need, stepping back, knowing that the writing will be there waiting for you. That said, for the majority of times when people say they have writer's block, I think a lot of it is just the resistance to writing. It's not that they can't write. I firmly believe that anybody could sit down and type out a sentence. It may not be good, but you could do it if you really had to. If someone was like, here's $1 million to write a sentence, you would write a sentence. So I think it's more that you're resistant to something, whether you're procrastinating or whether there's something in the novel that maybe you're just not sure what the next chapter is about, or maybe something went wrong in the last chapter and you need to go back and figure out why isn't it working now. Like there's different issues involved, but ultimately I do think that we can always write, we can always create when we sit down and do it. So for me, like I have spent a lot of time developing different strategies that I use for when I'm feeling that resistance. And sometimes it's sitting down with a cup of tea and my notebook and just like brainstorming or making lists of like what could happen next, or what do I want this chapter to have in it. I love the writing sprints, setting a timer and just getting as many words down without editing yourself and without doubting yourself. Just write for 5 minutes and see what comes up. And then I do a technique I use a lot when I'm feeling really resistant is that what I call romance my novel, where maybe I'll take it out to a nice restaurant and I'll have a glass of wine, or maybe I'll come out here to my studio and I light a candle and I put on some soft music, and I try to tap back into that part of myself that really enjoys writing and like, remember, this is something you actually legitimately like to do. Why are you fighting yourself so hard on it? So those are some of the things that I'll do.
I love that. And thank you for drawing that distinction between writer's block and other factors like trauma and depression going along. I think that that's really important. And also I was thinking, like, while you're talking, resistance is such a better word than block,
It doesn't make it so much nicer.
Yeah, it's like it's negotiable. It's
something you can overcome. You can get past this.
Exactly.
Okay, so aside from the muddy middle, I know a lot of people also struggle with time management, especially in November, where a lot of things tend to happen in November. So I'm interested
books
in how
coming out that you want to read. It's so tough.
So I'm interested on how you juggle your writing with work and parenting, especially when you have young children and you're homeschooling them.
Yeah, no, I know, right? Right before I came out here, we were doing homeschool, and we're learning all about horses. Horses are the big topic. So one of my girls, I'm like walking out the door and says, Mom, I really want to create and assemble a skeleton of a horse. Okay, give me 5 minutes. I'll print out something and then mommy has to go to work. So it is kind of a constant juggling act. I am super lucky that I have a wonderful support network. My husband also works from home, so we usually divide the day. I'll do mornings and school with the girls, and then he takes them for the afternoons while I get writing done. And then I schedule out my day. So every morning I will figure out, okay, from 1 to 2, I have the NaNo podcast. And then as soon as we're done here, from 2 to 3, I'm pre-writing my climax scene that's coming up. And then from 3 to 5, I'm working on a beta project for a critique partner. And then it'll be time to go in and get dinner. So like, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing at any given time. It doesn't always stick to that schedule. Like some things take longer than you think they will. But at least going into the day with a plan, it keeps me from having those moments of like, oh, here's 20 minutes of free time. Now what am I supposed to be working on?
Sounds like a novel writing plan almost.
Similar. No, I'm a planner through and through.
Well, your publisher does have this interesting rhythm of putting out one of your books every November, I think.
I know. I need to have words with them.
For many years in a row.
Coming up to me on book tour, like, Marissa, don't you know what month this is?
Yeah.
Books to be writing right now.
Well, just as a little segue to the interview, I wonder if you could tell us more about Cursed, what inspired you to write it, how it fits into your oeuvre, things like that. Anything you want to say about it?
Sure, thank you. So Cursed is the sequel to Gilded. Oh, I have them both right here. So Gilded was book 1, Cursed is the sequel. It is a duology, so this is the complete story. And they are a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, which was one of my favorite fairy tales when I was a kid. But I have rewritten it as if the king from the fairy tale is the wicked Earl King. So he is the villain of the story. And then Rumpelstiltskin is the love interest. So it is about a girl named Cerilda who has been cursed by the god of lies. And one night she crosses paths with the Earl King, who is the leader of the wild hunt. And she tells him that she is capable of spinning straw into gold. A little while after that, she is whisked away to the Earl King's haunted castle, and she is ordered to do that or she will be killed. And she can't, but there is a mischievous and very attractive poltergeist that lives in the castle. So he offers to help her, but for a price.
Just as you were saying that, I'm like, what are your bedtime stories like with your daughters?
Yeah, it's fun. I love telling the girls the classic fairy tales. Like I'll recite Grimm's stories to them. And that's really fun. I am terrible at just making stuff up from my head. And it's funny that my husband is really good at it. Like ever since they were little and we'd be, getting ready for bed and, tell us a story. And he just runs with it. And he doesn't care if it's good, if it's bad, if it makes any sense whatsoever. Whereas I try to tell a story just off the cusp and constantly like, wait, let me go back. I changed my mind. I have a better idea, and it's, I hate it.
That's funny.
Sounds like your husband is like a pantser in the making.
That's what I was thinking the same thing.
So true. He's the pantser. I'm the planner. 100%.
That's funny.
Okay. So I also want to ask a few questions about writing itself, because something I like a lot about your books is the worlds you build. So do you think world building or characters or character creation should come first? And what are your steps to world building?
Yeah, I think whichever one, it doesn't really matter which comes first. I think whichever serves the story or whichever writer is inspired to tackle first. I don't think there's any right or wrong way. For me, steps to world building, I do a ton of research. So I will figure out what am I setting, what is the big stuff about this story? So Gilded is set in a version, like a fantasy version of 17th century Germany. And so once I had that figured out, now we're doing research on the animals and the architecture and the clothing and like those sorts of details. And then I start to ask a ton of questions. What sorts of occupations might people in this village have? And there's a pantheon of gods in this story. So, okay, how many gods and what might we worship? What are the types of gods that these people would be praying to? And if there's gods, that means there's a religion. What does that mean? Are there churches? Are there temples? Are there religious festivals? Oh, if there's a festival, what kind of food do we have at the festival? What are the traditions? What are the rituals? And it's honestly just like asking a ton of questions and throwing out a ton of ideas and seeing what sticks. And I go down a lot of rabbit holes, and 80% of it, like, well, that's not going to work, but it was fun while it lasted. But then 20% of the time you're like, oh, that's a great idea. And you get really excited and something sparks a new idea. And you're like, oh, I could use that in the story in this way, or that changes this. And you just kind of see what feels right and you go with it, which is so not scientific at all, but that's kind of how I do it.
Yeah, that's a good segue into my next question. And Josie, I was going to say maybe we have a lot of questions from the community. So I was going to say we can switch gears and go to them after this, but I just actually heard this concept of headcanon, and maybe I'm late to it, but it, you know, you guys might know what it means, but just in case viewers don't, it's like what you know to be true about a character that's in a story that's not written down. And I think that's so interesting, especially in the term of like your fairy tale retellings, and in terms of characterization and in playing with those existing characters and making them new for yourself. So I'm curious if there are like relationships that kind of guide you when you're doing like fairy tale retellings, or how you really think about that evolution of character.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice using the fairy tales because then you are given a set of characters to play with. And one of the things that I really love about doing fairy tales is that usually the fairy tale itself gives us very little information, and it's kind of a blank slate. And so in doing Rumpelstiltskin, I knew we were going to have a miller's daughter. All right, then we automatically have a father. We knew we were going to have the Wicked King, and we knew we were going to have Rumpelstiltskin. Beyond that, there's so much you can do. And so I have those core relationships that really make up the dynamics for most of the story. You know, the plot really revolves around really these three characters. The father's in a little bit, but not as much. But you have to populate an entire world from that. So we have villagers, and we have a castle full of ghosts and monsters. And in this story, there evolved this whole subplot involving what are called moss maidens, which were from Germanic folklore. And so these, you know, creatures that kind of protect this enchanted forest. And so I just kind of see what works. And it comes back to asking a lot of questions again. You know, are all of the ghosts mean? Are they all nice? How much, you know, differentiation are we going to have? Do we have ghosts who really like living in this haunted castle? Do we have ghosts who despise it? Do we have ghosts who really hate the Earl? I mean, you just kind of see what develops over the course of the story. And I'll do a little bit of planning for the main characters at the outset, but honestly, a lot of it just comes up in the course of writing, and you meet a new character on the page and you're immediately like, what kind of character is this? Let's find out. Let's hear what they have to say. Let's figure out what their personality is. And sometimes a character will really surprise me, and they just have a ton of personality and like a really strong voice. And sometimes not. Sometimes I have to go back and think about them later and figure out ways to like make them more interesting or jazz them up in revisions. But it really is for me, it's a very organic process.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear. Yeah, you've taken the slim tail of Rumpelstiltskin and made it quite a bit bigger.
I know.
Josie, do you have any questions that you picked up from chat, or do you want me to look in?
Oh, we did get a few from Instagram, so I want to do like one of those real
Cool.
fast. So, I'll probably say these usernames wrong, so sorry to any of the viewers. But from someone named Nearly Wifing, they asked, when writing multiple point of views, how do you decide which point of view tells which part of the story?
Yeah, so generally speaking, for every scene, the character that is doing the most, so whatever the major action of the scene is, whoever's doing it, whoever is making big choices and like forwarding the plot, is that the right way to say it? Moving the plot forward the most, that's probably going to be my viewpoint character. Sometimes you have characters in which like both of them are being really dynamic and having a lot of action within the same scene. If that's the case, then I will generally pick whichever character I feel like has the most to lose. Or it could be a question of like, is a secret learned in this chapter? In which case I would want to use whichever character doesn't already know this thing or will be the most surprised so that we can get like the biggest emotional reaction from them.
Okay,
Cool.
and thank you for that one. And the next one, I'm kind of like combining a bunch into this one. So I think this one's mostly for like post nano and revising or like staying motivated with like editing. How do you decide if like a story is good enough to like continue editing or to like stay motivated in the editing process?
That's a good question. First of all, make sure you get to the end. Maybe it happens during nano, maybe it doesn't, but I don't think we can have the capacity to decide if a story is good and worthy of continuing until you've gotten to that end, especially if you stop somewhere in that murky middle and you haven't gotten to the fun climactic part yet. Then you're just always going to be stuck in this place and have a memory of this story as like, oh, it was so boring and nothing ever happened. So at least reach the end of your draft first. Once you've done that, not every story is worth going back to. I certainly have my drawer of stories that never got revised. I think it comes down to your own intuition. Do you still love this story? Are you excited to go back and revise it and work on it some more? If so, then take it to the next level.
That's great advice. Do you have another one, Josie? Or?
Yeah, I think this is also combining a bunch that people asked. So
Yeah, that's good.
I saw a lot about like finding like critique partners or like finding a writing community. And I think people are asking like, how do you like go up like about finding that kind of community?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. And I haven't had to look for a critique partner in 20 years. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask. I have one beta reader. We have been critiquing each other's stuff since we both wrote Sailor Moon fan fiction like forever ago. And her name is Tamara Moss / Tamara Felsinger. And she just had a new book come out. And she actually changed her pen name. Did she publish under Tamara Bailey? Gosh darn, I should know that. Anyway, I just posted on Instagram, look it up. What was the question? How do you find critique partners? I found mine through fan fiction. I don't know. Is there, I mean, there must be stuff on the NaNo website for this, isn't there?
I was going to say NaNoWriMo is a pretty good place.
Yeah.
Whether going to our write-ins or on the website or just on other internet sites. Like, were you on LiveJournal? A lot of people back in the day.
I was way back in the day.
Yeah. So a lot of people, the NaNoWriMo community kind of formed there first in some ways, or a lot of people came from there. So yeah. I
feel a Wattpad gets talked about a lot too as a good resource.
Yeah.
And another one I saw, I think it drove upon how like you wrote like a bunch of the Lunar Chronicles during the first NaNoWriMo you had. So like, do you usually write like all of the series at once, or do you like write them separately?
I wish that I could still. That was of course being publication. So I didn't have deadlines or like anybody waiting for anything. After I did that NaNo where I wrote the first 3 books, it did take 2 years to revise CINDER. So like it wasn't an overnight, like, oh, finish NaNo, here you go, agents. Like it took a long time to revise it. These days I do as much planning as I can in advance, but because you do have deadlines and a publishing schedule, it gets to a point where it's like, well, I wish I could do more, but it's time to write the first book, and fingers crossed, I don't want to change anything later.
Here's a fun one from Nicole. They ask, what is the first thing that comes to you when starting a new project? Is it a character, a plot idea, a world, or etc.? For them, it's always characters or the end of the story.
Yeah, it totally depends. I have had it be characters. Usually for me, it's a what if question. What if Cinderella was a cyborg? What if a superhero fell in love with a supervillain? What if the Rumpelstiltskin was actually in love with the miller's daughter? And so usually it's something along those lines that kind of gives me the overall theme for the story, and then I kind of start exploring it from there.
And another I saw from Ace Nightingale. Do you develop your characters before or during your writing, and how do you go about that?
Yeah, so most of it happens during for me. And this is one of those elements, kind of like plotting versus pantsing, like everybody's different. And I think there's a wide spectrum of how we do it. I will generally know a little bit about my main characters before we start, a little bit about their family life. Do they have siblings? Do they have any like huge traumas in their background? I like to know like what's motivating them, at least in chapter 1, like what do they really care about in chapter 1? What do they really want? And after that, I just start writing, and it's really, really common for me to not have a great idea of who the character is or have a great idea of what their voice sounds like until the end of the first draft. Usually by the time I get to the end, now I'm really starting to hear them. And so then I have to go back, and that's a huge part of my revision process is taking the character that now I know them, and I can go back through the plot and make sure their motivations really make sense as per who they are, and make sure the dialogue is all in their voice. And that usually takes a couple of drafts.
That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, Marissa, is Joyce Keller says she doesn't know the first line of her novel until she's written the last line of the rough draft.
That is such a great point. Yeah. I always change the beginnings.
Yeah.
I saw this from a lot of pantsers in the chat. I think they're like asking what like an effective outline looks like to you, if you have any tips on like outlining.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, as much as an outline works for me, I think it's great to try different methods and try different techniques to figure out whether or not you like it. So if you've always pantsed, like give outlining a shot. But I know lots of wonderfully talented professional writers who don't outline, like it's not a necessity. So do what you need to do. For me, I will use the Save the Cat plot beats. So check out Save the Cat Writes the Novel by Jessica Brody, is a wonderful resource. And I will kind of figure out what these major parts of the story are, these major moments that have to happen, make sure that I've got those like really solid. And then it's largely a matter of connecting the points, and how do we get from the midpoint to the climax? What sorts of subplots do we need to continue to develop? How can we progressively make things worse as we're going along? And once I have what feels like a pretty complete story, usually the last thing that I do before I start to write is I will read through the outline beginning to end and just make sure that every scene naturally progresses to the next one and it doesn't feel like we have any really huge plot holes. again, keeping in mind that things always change once you actually start to write it.
I was going to say to the pantsers who are asking that question, you could feasibly still write an outline right now for the next 12 days.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be an outline. It can be like a what if with just some notes and some thought bubbles. So
Yeah.
might be one way to get through the muddy middle.
Yeah, there's also the what do they call it? The headlights method. And I don't know what famous author talked about this to begin with, but the idea that like you're driving on a dark road and you can only see as far as your headlights. So it's really common for people to just outline the next 3 or 4 chapters, like just figure out what's going to happen there, write them, and then, okay, well, what happens in the next 3 or 4 chapters? And just something to give yourself a little bit of guidance.
That's great advice.
And I know that goes into another question I saw really well. Like Kayla asked if you have like any other writing craft books that you use or recommend, since you've mentioned Save the Cat.
Yeah. So Save the Cat's probably the one that I refer to the most. I also really love Plot and Structure by James Scott Bell. Is a great one. And honestly, Chris Beatty's No Plot, No Problem was one of like the first books that I ever read where I was like, yeah, I can do this.
That's great to throw that in the mix after the Plot and Structure and Save the Cat. And then,
right?
What the hell? Go for it.
You don't know what you need at any given moment.
Yeah.
Okay. I also saw a fun question from Anna. They asked that recently they were writing a story for a short story, and they got very emotional while writing it. So do you have like also similar experiences where you're like really touched by your own writing, or you end up just crying at something?
Yeah, I have cried twice while writing, both during death scenes. So I cried while I was writing Scarlet, and then I cried while I was writing Heartless. And
Okay.
I won't go beyond that for people who maybe want to read them. But yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad thing. You know, if you are getting emotional, then you're probably tapping into something that your readers are going to feel too.
And I lost where the person went, but they asked if you have like early inspirations for your like what inspired you early on. I know fanfic would be like one of them, but like do you have like any authors you like look up to for like writing style or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, so many. Lee Bardugo is one of my like writing heroes. Laini Taylor, I really love her. Roshni Chokshi is another that I think is just incredible. Honestly, there's so many though. So yeah. But like from old inspirations, like things that influenced me a long time ago, R.L. Stine was huge. I think that I still do cliffhangers largely because of Goosebumps. And then Roald Dahl was like one of my heroes when I was growing up, and I loved Charlie and the Chocolate Factory especially. I read that over and over again.
I might take this moment to point out to viewers, because I forgot to mention this earlier, is that you have a podcast, The Happy Writer, where you talk to a lot of the writers who you like to read. So just so people can check that out.
Oh, I just got a new one from Ace Nightingale. So now that you're published, how fast or how frequently are you writing first drafts versus revising? How many hours do you typically work a day, and how is that split up?
Oh boy, it really varies. You know, writing for me is, it's kind of, there's a cyclical process to it. So these days it takes probably on average about 9 months start to finish for me to write a book. So there'll be maybe, I don't know, a month of like brainstorming and outlining time. but it's never like that's just what I'm doing. It's like I'm revising this thing while drafting this thing while researching this thing, which makes it kind of hard to like really figure out how much time goes into everything. Once I'm in the first draft period, I might have a week where I'm drafting for 3 or 4 hours a day. And then I might have a week where, okay, now I'm not going to be drafting, but I'm going to be figuring out tweaking the outline, or I need to pause and do some more research before I can continue. So it really varies. Once I get into revisions are actually more fun for me. So then I can be more consistent of working on it every day or working on it almost every day.
Me, I honestly like really hearing about like the timeline, because I think it shows that you don't have to do like every single thing during Nano. Like you're just getting words down. You don't have to like do like you have a 9-month process. You can't do 9 months of work in 1 month.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I love, one of my favorite things about Nano is that it is like, for this 1 month, let's just focus on writing this first draft and getting this part of the process done. And like, it's not researching, it's not outlining, it's not planning, it's just writing. And it's not revising and it's not editing, it's just writing. And to like really compartmentalize that and decide I'm not going to critique myself, I'm not going to edit, I'm not going to go back and fix things. I'm just going to get the story as I know it down into some form that I can then come back and work on later. I think that's so beneficial for so many writers.
And this is question 4 from Storyfield, and I'll probably okay. I know I hear a lot that like once you write a first draft, just to like leave it alone, like lock it up in a drawer and don't like look at it. And so they're asking, how long after finishing a first draft do you wait before you start revising?
It totally depends. When time allows, I love to set it aside for a month or even more if I can. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes your editor is like, okay, Marissa, when's it coming? So sometimes I have to turn around and start in on revisions right away, but the more time I can give myself, the better. And a lot of times, like I don't usually, when I have that extra time, like let's say I have a month before I need to start on revisions, I don't just use that time to like do nothing. Now is a time when, okay, let me set this one over here and I'm going to go work on like maybe a fun back burner project, or I'm going to use this month to be like a well-filling month, or, I'll have something else that I'm kind of focused on, because then I feel that really allows my subconscious to like really work on all of the problems of this book, so that when I come back to it, hopefully I have a lot of new ideas and a lot of new inspiration.
So I'm going to ask a little follow-up to that. I've talked to so many NaNoWriMo writers who feel resistance towards the revision part because it's so different for them than the rough draft part. And sometimes I think it's also that they're a little scared to look at the prose they wrote in November. And my
legit.
Yeah, it's totally legit. But my line is that it's better than you think it's going to be. Like generally, I think there are a lot of gems in there. So I'm just curious: do you experience the same thing, or do you look forward to revision?
I do look forward to revision. These days, I don't actually sit down and read the novel that I wrote in its entirety. I will. So while I'm writing that first draft, I have my outline already. If something in a chapter changes from the outline, then I will update that description in the outline. So that after I have written it, I have a brand new outline that actually correlates with what I wrote. So I will go through the outline and from that decide what needs to change, and what, big things. Okay, this chapter needs to move here. This chapter needs to be deleted. This chapter needs to be, I need a way to make this chapter more exciting, or, whatever it is. And so then I'll just kind of like pick and choose the problems and go in and fix chapter by chapter rather than first reading it beginning to end. That works for me because it kind of takes away that feeling of like, oh, I don't want to spend the next 3 days reading through this horrible thing that I wrote.
Can be
But you
very
can
daunting.
still start making progress on it.
Yeah, cool.
I saw a really cute question from Anna. They asked, what would be your advice to your younger self as a writer?
Calm down, Marissa. I was so anxious. I wanted to be published so bad. And I spent many, many years trying to write a novel and finish a novel with this dream of being published. And when it didn't happen quickly, I got super frustrated. And there were many times when I felt like I was a failure and like I'm wasting my time. And why am I not better at this? And why is it not going how I thought it would go? And why am I not published already? And I just like wasted so much energy and gave myself so much stress, feeling like you have to do it right now. So I wish that I could go back and be like, just take a breath. Like it's all part of the process. It takes time. You'll get there. Keep working at it. Don't give up, but also like don't stress yourself out so much.
Good advice.
Um,
We're 2 minutes before 2
yeah.
o'clock Pacific time. Do you have maybe 1 or 2 more questions, Josie? And I thought we could maybe end with all 3 of us giving just like one tip, one bit of advice for people to keep writing to the end.
Okay.
I think that's it. You just gave your advice. Keep writing to the end.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, yeah. Let's all 3 say that.
Okay, so Sarah asked this, and I also kind of wonder this. So you like written books inspired by fairy tales or Alice in Wonderland, and you have books inspired by superheroes. So do you have like any idea what your next work will be inspired by, or will it be inspired by other characters or other stories?
I could pretty much tell you what like my next 10 books are going to be.
Yeah. All right.
We've got lots in the works.
Please tell us, Marissa.
So my next book, which we just announced the title, it's called With a Little Luck. And this is a companion to Instant Karma. So it's another contemporary romance. And it's about Jude, who is the twin brother of Prudence, who is the main character in Instant Karma. And he is gifted the magical gift from the universe of having just uncanny good luck. And for a while, all is going great, and he is able to ask out the girl of his dreams and what could go wrong. Turns out things can go wrong. And it's kind of a careful what you wish for sort of story. So that is coming up next. After that, I have more fairy tale retellings in the works, and I have a couple more graphic novels in the works, and more to come.
Cool.
I know, like, just going off of that, I know you said that one of your favorite books is Pride and Prejudice. Is that a book you will ever like revisit?
Oh gosh,
in your own way?
Maybe. I mean, never say never.
Cyborg influence, maybe.
Who knows?
Cyborg Darcy.
I mean, we've already had zombies. Why not cyborgs?
That's true. Yeah. Cool. Well, I know you've already told us about your plan for the day, Marissa, so we don't want to keep you.
That's right.
We want to keep you within range of that plan. But I think if we all have just maybe one tip to give, and before I give my tip, I just want to say how inspirational this has been, Marissa. You really are the embodiment of the NaNoWriMo spirit, and I know, I'm not going to say I hope, I know that you've inspired many people to get through the muddy middle and to keep writing. And I'm just thinking of the things you said about planning and pantsing, and how no matter if you're a planner or pantser at this point, I think just keep asking yourself, what if? Keep opening the doors to curiosity, and that will help you wake up and want to write more. So just keep asking questions.
Yeah. Josie, do you want to go next, or should I go next?
I wasn't prepared to go next, but okay. So yeah, like everyone, no matter like where you are in your Nano journey, you could have like just started yesterday, or you could be like at 40,000. But just be proud of yourself because you written something during November, and that's pretty cool. Like no matter what you do, and if you ever fall into like, if you ever feel like self-doubt or anything, I know that's always hard to combat, but I know for me, I'll just like let go and like I close my eyes or something and I don't look at the page and I just write whatever is on my mind. And I think even if at that point your characters are like ranting about NaNoWriMo themselves, whatever, it's a word count, hey? And it's stress relief and it's still fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I'm gonna go with progress, not perfection. It does not matter. Did you make progress today? Did you write 1,700 words? Did you write 100 words? Did you spend some time brainstorming? Did you come up with a new plot twist? Whatever it is, if you made progress, you are winning. You're doing it. And so just keep making progress. Don't worry about being perfect or like even good or halfway decent. Like just keep moving forward and eventually you'll get to the end.
Love that. One sentence usually leads to a second sentence. So just show up and write. Thanks so much, Marissa. This was such a treat.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't. We just got cursed in the mail. I'll give one last plug. Josie and I just got this, so we're gonna exit this webcast and start reading it right now. All right. Thanks, everybody. Keep writing.
Bye. Good luck.